In the shadow of towering pines, a woman's desperate cries pierce the Montana night. Surrounded by snarling wolves, she clutches her saddlebags, holding a secret that will soon turn an entire town against her. When a lone cowboy answers her prayers, firing his rifle into the darkness and scattering the savage pack, she believes she's found salvation. By morning light, that salvation turns to ash. The sheriff's posse discovers a human skull among her belongings, and suddenly the woman's savior watches as his neighbors transform into a mob thirsting for frontier justice. But in this tale of rescue and redemption, nothing is quite what it seems. As the noose of accusation tightens, one question burns brighter than the torches of the vengeful townsfolk. What if the skull holds a truth far older than any crime? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Blackwood had ridden these trails enough to know when something wasn't right. The moon hung full and heavy above the Montana pines, casting long shadows across the worn path to Silver Creek. His horse, Duke, had grown restless a quarter-mile, back, ears twitching at something beyond the veil of darkness. 20 years in these mountains had taught Marcus to trust those subtle warnings. Then he heard it, a scream that didn't belong to any mountain cat or nightbird, human, female, the kind of cry that spoke of desperate circumstances. Marcus drew his Winchester from its scabbard, the familiar weight settling against his shoulder. As he urged Duke forward, the gelding's hooves struck earth with practiced quiet, picking through the undergrowth as another cry split the night. Closer now, maybe half a mile ahead, near the creek bend. Through breaks in the canopy, moonlight revealed what his ears had already traced. A woman, backed against a granite outcropping, wielding a branch like a club. 6 wolves circled her, their grey forms liquid shadow in the sparse light. Her horse lay still some yards away, its saddle twisted and empty. One wolf lunged, testing. The woman swung, connecting with enough force to send the beast yelping backward. But Marcus saw what she couldn't, 2 more wolves creeping wide, flanking her position. They'd coordinated their hunt with the patience of experienced killers. "Hold steady!" Marcus's voice boomed across the clearing. The woman's head snapped toward him, but she kept her makeshift weapon raised. Smart. The wolves paused, reassessing this new threat. Marcus leveled his rifle at the nearest wolf and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked like thunder in the confined space. He hadn't aimed to kill, just to scatter. The wolf nearest his target leaped away, and the others followed suit, melting into the darkness with frustrated yips and growls. Only when the last wolf disappeared did Marcus lower his rifle and nudge Duke forward. The woman remained pressed against the rock face, chest heaving, branch still raised. As he drew closer, details emerged. She wore riding clothes of quality make, though trail-worn. Her dark hair had mostly escaped its pins, and her eyes held more calculation than fear. "You're safe now, ma'am," Marcus said, keeping his voice gentle. "Though I'd feel better if you'd lower that branch before my horse gets the wrong idea." A moment's hesitation, then she lowered her improvised weapon. "Thank you." Her voice carried educated tones, Eastern perhaps, but steady despite her ordeal. "I've encountered wolves before, but never so many, nor so coordinated." Marcus dismounted, movements deliberate. "They've been bold lately. Winter was harsh." He gestured to her fallen horse. "Your mount?" "Alive, I think, just spooked and—" "Thrown a shoe. I'm Sarah Bennett, Marcus Blackwood." He noted how she kept one hand on her saddlebags, even in the aftermath of mortal danger. "Silver Creek's not far. I can escort you. See to your horse." "I'd be grateful." She gathered her belongings with efficient movements, though Marcus caught a wince when she lifted the saddlebags. "I was headed there anyway. I have research to conduct in the area." Something in her tone caught his attention, a careful neutrality that spoke of secrets. But out here, everybody carried something they'd rather not discuss. Heaven knew he had his own past, carefully buried. "Research?" he asked, offering a hand to help her mount behind him. She took it after securing her saddlebags across Duke's rump. Yes, historical and anthropological studies. She settled behind him, her grip firm but not fearful. Though I'm beginning to think the local wildlife wasn't adequately covered in my briefing. Marcus allowed himself a small smile at her attempt at humor, even as he catalogued the incongruities. A well-educated woman, alone on these trails, with saddlebags she protected even while fighting for her life. But asking questions wasn't the mountain way. Out here, you judged folk by their actions, not their mysteries. He turned Duke toward Silver Creek, the moon lighting their path. Behind them, her horse had struggled to its feet, limping but able to follow. The night's excitement seemed to have passed. But as they rode, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this rescue was just the beginning of a much longer tale. The wolves' howls echoed in the distance, reminding them that in these mountains, danger never truly retreated. It just waited for another opportunity. Sarah's grip tightened slightly at the sound, but she said nothing. Marcus respected that kind of quiet courage. It would serve her well in Silver Creek, where frontier hospitality often came wrapped in layers of suspicion toward outsiders. Little did he know just how much suspicion was yet to come. Dawn painted Silver Creek in shades of promise. Marcus stood on the boarding house porch, steam rising from his coffee cup as he watched Sarah's horse being tended to at the livery. Doc Wilson had declared it nothing serious, just a thrown shoe and some scratches. The same could be said for Sarah herself, though she'd refused more than basic first aid, retiring to her rented room with those saddlebags clutched close. Quite the excitement last night. Sheriff Thomas Cole's boots announced his approach before his voice did. The man had a way of making casual conversation sound like an interrogation, earned from 15 years wearing the badge. "Wolves," Marcus replied, not turning. "Getting bold." "So I heard." Cole settled against the railing, his own coffee forgotten in his hand. "Interesting timing, though. Had a telegram yesterday about a woman matching your rescue's description. Traveling alone, educated type." Marcus sipped his coffee, letting the silence stretch. Cole would get to his point eventually. "Seems some artifacts went missing from a dig site near Hawthorne. Nothing too valuable, they say, but historical. Significance." Cole studied Marcus's profile. "You've always had good instincts about people, Blackwood. What's your read?" Before Marcus could answer, a commotion erupted from the direction of the livery. Deputy Frank Mills's voice rose above the general murmur, sharp with accusation. "Sheriff, you better come see this." Marcus and Cole exchanged glances before heading toward the growing crowd. Sarah stood near her saddle, face pale but composed, as Mills held something wrapped in an oilcloth. Her saddlebags lay open at his feet. "Deputy," Cole's voice carried authority, "explain why you're searching a guest's belongings." "Was helping. Jim checked the saddle for damage, Sheriff. Found this wrapped up careful-like." Mills pulled back the cloth, revealing what could only be a human skull. Gasps rippled through the gathering crowd. "Looks mighty fresh to my eye." Sarah stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. "I can explain. This is a legitimate archaeological specimen." "Legitimate?" Mills cut her off. "Like those legitimate artifacts that went missing in Hawthorne?" Marcus watched the color drain from Sarah's face. Not from guilt, he thought, but from the realization of how this looked, how it would play in a frontier town where justice sometimes came at the end of a rope rather than the bang of a gavel. "Sheriff!" She turned to Cole, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I have documentation. This is part of an authorized study." "Documentation can be forged." Mills interrupted again, clearly enjoying his moment. "Could be evidence of murder, could be grave robbery. Either way, ain't natural for a woman to be carrying dead folk around." The crowd's murmurs grew darker. Marcus recognized the shift in tone. He'd seen it before, when fear and suspicion took root in good people's hearts. They'd welcomed Sarah last night, offered help and shelter. Now they looked at her like she was something dangerous, something other. "Sheriff Cole," Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself subtly between Sarah and the growing crowd. "Maybe we should continue this discussion in your office." Cole nodded, professional mask firmly in place. "Agreed. Mills, secure the evidence. Miss Bennett, you'll come with me. Mr. Blackwood, I appreciate your concern, but this is official business now." "I'm involved," Marcus stated simply. "Found her, brought her here. That makes it my business too." For a moment, Cole looked like he might argue. Then he shrugged. "Your reputation buys you that much, but don't make me regret it." As they walked toward the sheriff's office, Marcus caught fragments of conversation from the dispersing crowd. Words like witch and grave robber floated on the morning air. He'd lived in Silver Creek long enough to know how quickly whispers could become shouts, and shouts could become actions that good people would regret once the fever of fear broke. Sarah walked with her head high, but Marcus saw how her fingers worked against each other, twisting with nervous energy. She glanced at him once, a look that carried equal measures of gratitude and apology. He answered with a slight nod. Whatever her story was, she deserved the chance to tell it before the town decided her fate. Behind them, the sunrise that had seemed so promising minutes ago now cast shadows that stretched like pointing fingers across Silver Creek's dusty streets. Sheriff Cole's office smelled of leather and gun oil with an undertone of stale coffee. Sarah sat straight-backed in the wooden chair before his desk, her composure remarkable given the circumstances. The skull lay wrapped on Cole's desk like an unwelcome guest at a dinner party. "Start from the beginning," Cole said, fingers steepled beneath his chin, "and make it good. I'm employed by the University of Pennsylvania's Archaeological Department." Sarah's voice carried the same steady tone she'd used during the wolf attack. "We're conducting a survey of Native American burial sites with full permissions from both the government and tribal authorities." "Convenient," Deputy Mills sneered from his position by the door. "Any proof of these permissions?" "In my papers, which you're welcome to examine." She gestured to her confiscated saddlebags. "Along with my credentials and correspondence from the university." Marcus watched from his place against the wall, noting how Cole's eyes narrowed at the mention of credentials. The sheriff was no fool. He'd seen his share of forged documents and smooth-talking confidence artists. "And Hawthorne?" Cole pressed. "The missing artifacts?" "A misunderstanding." Sarah's fingers twisted in her lap, the only sign of her distress. "I had proper authorization to transport specific items. Someone jumped to conclusions." The door burst open, admitting Gerald Walsh, owner of the Silver Creek Sentinel and self-appointed voice of public opinion. "Sheriff, is it true about the skull?" Cole's jaw tightened. "This is a closed discussion, Walsh." "Public has a right to know," Walsh countered, already pulling out his notebook. "Especially with what happened in Millbrook last month." Marcus saw Sarah stiffen. "What happened in Millbrook?" "Body found," Walsh said with ghoulish enthusiasm. "Young woman. Some say she was part of some heathen ritual. Never did catch who did it." "That's enough," Marcus pushed off from the wall. "You're not helping, Walsh, and you're being mighty protective of a stranger, Blackwood." Walsh's eyes gleamed with the scent of a story. "Makes a body wonder why." Before Marcus could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Through the window, they could see a crowd gathering in the street, led by Reverend Harrison's distinctive black coat. "Seems word travels fast," Cole sighed, standing. "Miss Bennett, I'm going to have to ask you to stay in town while we verify your story. Mills, escort her back to the boarding house. Post a deputy outside." "For my protection?" Sarah asked quietly. "Or to prevent my escape?" Cole met her gaze levelly. "Both." As Mills led Sarah out, Marcus moved to follow, but Cole's voice stopped him. "A word, Blackwood?" Walsh took the hint and left, but not before giving Marcus a look that promised tomorrow's paper would make interesting reading. "You're involving yourself in a complicated situation," Cole said once they were alone. "Wouldn't be the first time." "No, but it might be the most dangerous." Cole picked up the wrapped skull, turning it in his hands. "Towns still roar from the Millbrook business. People are scared, looking for someone to blame." She's not responsible for Millbrook, Marcus said firmly. Maybe not, but fear ain't rational, and a woman traveling alone with human remains. Cole shook his head. Doesn't help that she's educated different. Makes folks uncomfortable. Since when did being educated become a crime? It's not the education, it's what it represents. Cole set the skull down carefully. Change, progress, things that worry people who've carved out a life here. Marcus understood. He'd seen how progress crept across the frontier like an incoming storm, unsettling those who preferred the old ways. But that didn't make it right. Give me time, he said. Let me look into her story before things get out of hand. Cole studied him for a long moment. You've got until the telegraph office gets a response from Pennsylvania. After that, if her story doesn't check out... He left the sentence hanging. Outside, the crowd had grown. Marcus could hear Reverend Harrison's voice, though not his words. But he didn't need to. He knew the kind of fire and brimstone that would be flowing from the good Reverend's lips. Better hurry, Cole added softly. I don't think we've got much time before someone decides to take matters into their own hands. Marcus nodded and stepped out into the street. The crowd parted before him, their whispers following in his wake. He'd earned their respect over the years, but respect was a fragile thing when fear took hold. The sun had barely reached its peak, and already Silver Creek teetered on the edge of chaos. Marcus could only hope he'd find answers before the balance tipped toward tragedy. With Deputy Mills occupied guarding Sarah's door, Marcus had a clear opportunity to examine her saddlebags in the sheriff's office. Cole had granted him this courtesy with a warning. Make it quick and don't remove anything. The leather bags spoke of quality and long use, their surfaces marked with the scrapes and stains of hard travel. Inside the first bag, wrapped carefully, in oilcloth, he found what he was looking for, a leather portfolio stamped with the University of Pennsylvania seal. The documents within told a story different from the whispers in the street. Letters of introduction bearing official letterheads, detailed maps marked with careful annotations, sketches of artifacts accompanied by precise measurements, and notes in a steady hand. One document caught his eye, a letter dated 3 months. Ego, dear Ms. Bennett, your proposal regarding the archaeological survey of Montana Territory burial sites has been approved. Your expertise in Native American artifacts and your previous work with the Smithsonian make you uniquely qualified for this sensitive undertaking. As discussed, discretion is paramount. Recent incidents of grave robbery and artifact theft necessitate a careful approach. Your contact among the local tribes, Standing Bear, has agreed to guide you to the designated sites. Enclosed, please find your official credentials and necessary permissions. Regards, Dr. William Harrison, Department Chair. Archaeological Studies. Marcus sat back, pieces falling into place. The careful handling of the saddlebags, her protective nature toward the skull, not the actions of a grave robber, but of someone entrusted with preserving history. A shadow fell across the desk. Find anything interesting? He turned to find Sarah in the doorway, Mills hovering behind her like an anxious sheepdog. She'd been allowed to retrieve a fresh shirt from her room, and her hair was neatly pinned back, restoring some of her dignity. Your credentials appear genuine, Marcus said, noting how her shoulders relaxed slightly. But they raise questions. Why travel alone on such an important mission? I wasn't alone initially. She stepped into the room, Mills following. My assistant Thomas took ill in Hawthorne. The university will confirm he's recovering there. I couldn't delay. There's a specific site I need to document before... Before what? Sarah glanced at Mills, then back to Marcus. Before others find it. There are people who see our heritage as a commodity to be sold, not preserved. Every month, more sites are looted. Like Millbrook? Marcus watched her reaction carefully. Millbrook was no ritual killing, she said firmly. It was murder meant to look like one, designed to stir up fear, the same kind of fear that makes it harder for legitimate researchers like me to do our work. The conviction in her voice rang true, but Marcus noted something else, knowledge she hadn't shared with the sheriff. You know something about Millbrook. Only what I've heard, but I've seen similar patterns. Create fear. Blame it on native customs, then use that fear as cover for looting sacred sites while authorities are distracted. Her hands clenched. It's happening all across the frontier. Mills shifted uncomfortably. Sheriff said to bring her back once she got fresh clothes. A moment more, Marcus held up the letter. This mentions Standing Bear. I know him. Respected man among the Blackfeet. If he vouches for you, he will, Sarah said quickly, but he's 3 days' ride from here at the summer hunting camps. Too far to help before the telegraph reply came. Still, it was another piece supporting her story. Marcus carefully returned the documents to their wrappings, mind working through implications. Time's up, Mills insisted, more firmly this time. Sarah turned to go, then paused. Mr. Blackwood, thank you for looking deeper than the surface. Marcus watched them leave, the deputy guiding Sarah back to her confined quarters. Through the window, he could see small groups of townspeople gathered, their gestures animated as they discussed the morning's revelations. The sun had risen higher, but somehow the shadows in Silver Creek seemed to have grown longer. He picked up the portfolio again, weighing more than just its physical presence. Inside these pages lay the means to prove Sarah's innocence, but also evidence of something larger, something that had already led to one death in Millbrook. The question was, how many more deaths would follow before the truth came to light? Dawn was just breaking when Marcus rode out, Sarah's map secured in his saddlebag. He'd left word with Cole about his destination, the marked dig site in Thunder Valley, about 15 miles northeast of Silver Creek. What he hadn't mentioned was the growing certainty that Sarah's discoveries had stirred up something more dangerous than local superstition. Duke's hooves kicked up dust along the trail, each mile revealing more signs of recent traffic than these remote paths usually saw. Broken branches, fresh horseshoe prints, the kind of details that spoke of regular passage rather than occasional. Hunting parties. The sun had climbed halfway to its peak when he spotted the first survey marker, a small flag partially hidden behind a boulder. Sarah's maps proved accurate, leading him through a narrow draw into a sheltered valley. Here the signs of archaeological work became clear, carefully gridded areas, wooden stakes marking boundaries, and the unmistakable evidence of methodical excavation. But something was wrong. The site had been disturbed, and recently. Tools lay scattered, some broken. Pages from a logbook fluttered against rocks where they'd been caught by the wind. This wasn't the ordered chaos of an active dig. It was the aftermath of deliberate vandalism. Marcus dismounted, tying Duke to a sturdy pine. His Winchester came with him as he approached the main excavation area. The soil here had been precisely layered back, revealing what looked like the entrance to a burial cave. More disturbing were the fresh boot prints leading into the darkness. That's far enough, Blackwood. The voice came from behind him, accompanied by the distinctive click of a revolver's hammer. Marcus turned slowly, recognizing James Tucker, one of Silver Creek's more prosperous ranchers, and a man who'd been suspiciously quiet during the town's growing unrest. Long way from your spread, Tucker. Could say the same about you. Tucker kept his revolver steady, but his eyes darted nervously to the cave entrance. This ain't your business. Maybe not, but grave robbing isn't your usual line of work either. Tucker's face darkened. You don't understand what's at stake here. This land, there's plans for it. Big plans. Can't have some university woman stirring up trouble about Indian burial grounds. Plans? Marcus shifted slightly, noting movement at the corner of his vision. The kind that made it worth killing that girl in Millbrook? That was unfortunate. A new voice joined them, as Edward Walsh, the newspaperman's brother and local land speculator, emerged from behind a boulder. She was just supposed to scare off the researchers. Got hysterical, threatened to expose everything. Accidents happen. Like the accident you're planning for Sarah Bennett? Nothing so crude. Walsh smiled thinly. Once the telegraph office gets our manufactured response from the university, the good people of Silver Creek will demand justice, No blood on anyone's hands. Marcus's finger tensed on his rifle's trigger. Except the blood's already there, isn't it? How many other sites have you looted? How many artifacts sold to private collectors? Progress requires sacrifice, Tucker said, but his voice wavered. The railroad's coming. Hotels, mines. Can't let old superstitions stand in the way. Superstitions that fetch a fine price from certain buyers, Marcus countered. That's what this is really about, isn't it? The artifacts you've been stealing. Walsh's smile vanished. You always were too clever for your own good, Blackwood. Tucker, we can't let him. The shot cracked across the valley without warning. Marcus dove behind a boulder as Tucker's bullet kicked up dirt where he'd stood. He heard boots scrabbling on rocks, men taking cover. Nothing personal, Walsh called out. But we've invested too much to let one nosy cowboy ruin everything. Marcus steadied his breathing, listening for movement. 3 sets of footsteps. There was another man he hadn't seen yet. The cave entrance was 30 yards to his left, offering better cover, but they'd expect that. Instead, he pulled Sarah's logbook from his saddlebag, tearing out pages and letting the wind take them. If he didn't make it back, at least some evidence might survive. Smart man like you should understand progress, Walsh continued, trying to draw him out. Think of the opportunities. We could cut you in. Marcus's response was a carefully aimed shot that splintered the rock near Walsh's head, sending him scrambling back with a curse. The answering gunfire told Marcus exactly where his opponents were, and that Tucker's nerve was breaking. You're right about one thing, Marcus called out. I do understand progress. He ejected the spent cartridge, chambered another round. But I also understand the difference between progress and theft, between civilization and barbarism. The winds of Thunder Valley carried his words, along with the scattered pages of proof, promising that whatever happened next, the truth wouldn't stay buried forever. Silver Creek's town hall had witnessed its share of heated debates, but tonight the tension crackled like heat lightning before a storm. Marcus stood at the back, clothes still dusty from his ride, watching Sheriff Cole try to maintain order. The evidence he'd brought back, scattered logbook pages and his account of Tucker and Walsh's attempted ambush, had thrown fuel on an already volatile situation. Order! Cole's voice cut through the chaos. We'll hear everyone out, but one at a time. Gerald Walsh pushed to the front, his reporter's notebook clutched like a shield. My brother's a respected businessman. These accusations are outrageous. Your brother tried to kill me, Marcus said quietly, but his voice carried. After admitting to murder in Millbrook. Sarah sat near the front, Deputy Mills still hovering nearby. She remained silent, but her back was straight, dignity intact, despite the whispers that followed her every movement. Convenient that there's no witnesses to these claims, Walsh spat. Just the word of a man who's shown suspicious interest in defending an obvious grave robber. Reverend Harrison stood, his severe black coat a slash of darkness in the lamplight. Brothers and sisters, we must consider the spiritual implications. These burial grounds are protected by law, Sarah interrupted, speaking for the first time, and by basic human decency. I came here to preserve history, not destroy it. The lady speaks of preservation. Tucker's wife rose, her voice trembling. With practiced emotion, while my James lies wounded from her conspirator's bullet. Marcus stepped forward. Your James shot first, Mrs. Tucker, after confessing to involvement in a murder and artifact theft ring. The crowd erupted again, divided between long-time supporters of the Tucker and Walsh families and those who'd begun to doubt the official story. Sheriff Cole's gavel cracked against his desk like distant thunder. We have telegrams, he announced, waiting for quiet. 2 of them. The room stilled. Cole held up the first paper. This one came earlier today, supposedly from the University of Pennsylvania, denouncing Miss Bennett as a fraud. He paused, letting the murmurs start before holding up the second. This one arrived an hour ago from the university's actual telegraph office, confirming Miss Bennett's credentials and expressing grave concern for her safety. Forgery! Walsh shouted, but there was fear beneath his bluster. The first one was the forgery. Cole continued. Sent from Hawthorne, where coincidentally several other false telegrams have been traced. Telegrams that preceded suspicious deaths and disappeared artifacts. Sarah stood, her voice clear and steady. I can prove everything I've said. The skull you found. It's over 300 years old, part of a respected burial site. I have documentation of its origin, the tribal permissions for its study, and... Enough! Walsh surged forward, mask finally cracking. We won't let some outsider woman destroy everything we've built. Tucker and I have plans for this territory. Railroads, hotels, mines, progress. Are you all so blind you can't see the opportunity? Opportunity. Marcus moved to stand beside Sarah. Is that what you call grave robbery? Murder? The destruction of sacred sites? Those sites are worth more in artifacts than they'd ever be as burial grounds, Walsh sneered. Private collectors pay well for authentic pieces. The girl in Millbrook threatened to expose everything. She was passionate about preservation, like you, Miss Bennett. See where that got her? The confession hung in the air like gunsmoke. Sheriff Cole's deputies moved quietly through the crowd toward Walsh, but the damage was done. The town had heard the truth from his own lips. Edward Walsh. Cole's voice carried the weight of law. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, grave robbery, and attempted murder of Marcus Blackwood. As the deputies led Walsh away, Marcus watched the crowd's mood shift like wind changing direction before a storm. Mrs. Tucker slipped out quietly. Others who'd been loudest in condemning Sarah now studied their boots in shame. Reverend Harrison cleared his throat. Perhaps we've been too quick to judge. The good book warns us about bearing false witness. Sarah accepted the implicit apology with a graceful nod, but Marcus saw the tears she held back. Not tears of fear or relief, but of frustration. Even with Walsh's confession, how many other sites had been looted? How many artifacts lost to private collectors? How much history destroyed in the name of progress? The town hall slowly emptied, leaving behind the lingering scent of lamp oil and the bitter taste of justice too long delayed. But as Marcus watched Sarah gather her papers, he knew this wasn't over. Tucker was still out there, and Walsh had mentioned others, a network of thieves and killers disguised as respectable businessmen. The truth had begun to emerge, but truth, like the artifacts Sarah sought to protect, was a fragile thing. It needed defenders willing to stand against the storms of progress and greed, preserving it for generations yet to come. Morning mist clung to the valley floor as Marcus and Sarah approached the Blackfeet summer camp. They'd ridden out at first, light, leaving Silver Creek behind, while Walsh cooled his heels in the jail. Despite Cole's protests about Sarah leaving town, Marcus had insisted they needed Standing Bear's testimony, and more importantly, his wisdom. The camp appeared through the mist like a vision from an older time. Lodges arranged in the traditional circle, smoke rising straight and true in the still air. Children stopped their play to watch the riders approach, and women paused in their morning work, their expressions carefully neutral. A tall figure emerged from the largest lodge, and Marcus felt Sarah straighten in her saddle. Standing Bear lived up to his name. Broad-shouldered and dignified, with grey-streaked hair and eyes that had seen nearly 7 decades of change sweep across his people's lands. "Brother!" Standing Bear greeted Marcus in English, though his slight nod acknowledged the respect behind the formal address. "You bring the one who carries our ancestors?" Sarah dismounted smoothly, producing a leather folder from her saddlebag. "Elder, I come seeking your counsel and confirmation. Your letters of permission." "Can wait," Standing Bear interrupted gently. "First, we will have coffee, and you will tell me why Tucker's men watch the eastern passes." Marcus's hand instinctively moved toward his rifle. "You've seen them?" 3 riders. They follow the old hunting trails, but they do not hunt game." Standing Bear gestured toward his lodge. "Come. Some stories are best told away from unfriendly ears." Inside the lodge, Standing Bear's wife, Morning Flower, served coffee in metal cups, a blend of old ways and new. The smell of sage and sweetgrass mixed with the coffee's aroma, creating an atmosphere of timeless contemplation. "Show me," Standing Bear said after they were seated. Sarah carefully unwrapped the skull, handling it with reverence. "Found in the cave at Thunder Valley. The markings here," she pointed to distinctive patterns on the bone, "match the descriptions in your grandfather's account of the Great Migration." Standing Bear studied the skull in silence, his weathered fingers tracing the ancient marks with infinite care. "Yes, this is Flying Hawk, a great medicine man. The patterns tell his story, how he led our people through the winter of great snows when the buffalo had gone far south." "The cave held other remains?" Morning Flower asked, her English precise and educated, a reminder that wisdom wore many faces. Sarah nodded. "A burial chamber undisturbed for centuries. Until now, Tucker and Walsh, they've been looting sites like these across the territory, selling artifacts to private collectors." "Not just artifacts," Standing Bear's voice carried centuries of weariness. "They steal our stories, our connection to the land. Each sacred item, each ancestor's bone they take, weakens the thread between past and future." Marcus leaned forward. "Walsh confessed to murder in Millbrook, but Tucker's still free. And there are others, if we could prove the sites are protected by white man's law." Standing Bear's smile held no humor. "Laws change like wind across prairie grass, but this," he touched the skull gently, "this is constant. Flying Hawk's people kept these valleys when the long winter came. His wisdom helped them survive. Now his bones may help us protect what remains." From a carved cedar box, Standing Bear produced a yellowed document. "Treaty of 1851. It recognizes these burial grounds as sacred sites, protected by federal law. My father insisted the words be written clear in both languages." Sarah's eyes widened as she read. "This is exactly what we need. With this and the university's documentation—" "Be careful," Morning Flower warned. "Tucker's kind do not surrender power easily. They will fight with weapons stronger than paper." "They already have," Marcus touched his rifle. "But now we fight on solid ground. Standing Bear, will you come to Silver Creek? Tell the judge what you've told us." The elder was silent for a long moment, consulting with Morning Flower in their native tongue. Finally, he nodded. "I will come. Flying Hawk's bones must be returned to sacred earth, and his story must be told. But first," he reached into the cedar box again, "you should know what Tucker truly seeks." He withdrew a piece of parchment, brittle with age. On it, crude symbols marked locations across a familiar landscape. Marcus's breath caught as he recognized the valley patterns. "A map?" Sarah asked. "More than that." Standing Bear's voice dropped lower. "Flying Hawk's last vision, he spoke of places where the earth holds yellow metal, places we kept secret, knowing what such knowledge brings." "Gold," Marcus said quietly. "That's what this is really about. The artifact theft, the murder. It's all a cover while they search the burial sites." "Sacred ground violated twice over," Morning Flower added softly. "Once for gold, once for the precious things that tell our stories." Standing Bear carefully rewrapped Flying Hawk's skull. "Tomorrow I will ride with you to Silver Creek. Tonight you will stay here, where Tucker's men cannot strike from shadow. And you will learn the true story of these valleys. Not just where gold lies hidden, but why our ancestors chose to keep such secrets." Outside, the mist had burned away, revealing a landscape both beautiful and harsh, like truth itself. Marcus thought, watching Sarah handle the ancient treaty with careful hands. Some things were worth more than gold: the weight of history, the honor of keeping faith with the past, and the courage to defend what was right, no matter the cost. Silver Creek's telegraph office had never seen such activity. Wires hummed with messages flowing in both directions, each click of the key building toward either salvation or destruction. Marcus stood watch outside while Sarah worked with the operator, her fingers drumming an anxious rhythm on the counter. Another. "I'm coming in," Tommy Wells, the young operator, announced. His fingers flew across his notepad, transcribing the incoming message. "From the University of Pennsylvania." Sarah snatched the paper the moment Tommy finished writing. "Urgent stop, Professor. Thomas recovered. Stop confirms attempted theft of research. Hawthorne. Stop federal marshals en route from Helena. Stop protect. All artifacts and documentation. Stop additional team members arriving 3 days. Stop. Federal marshals," Marcus mused, reading over her shoulder. "That'll give Tucker something to think about, if they arrive in time." Sarah folded the telegram carefully. "Thomas is alive. That's one weight off my conscience. But 3 days is a long time, and Tucker knows we've been to see Standing Bear, as Ainwa." If summoned by her words, the door burst open. Sheriff Cole entered, his face grave. "Tucker's men just rode through town, 6 of them, armed for bear. They're heading east, toward the summer camp." Marcus straightened. "How long ago?" 20 minutes. They're moving fast." Cole's hand rested on his gun belt. "I've got 2 deputies ready to ride. Could use another steady hand." Marcus nodded, but Sarah stepped forward. "I'm coming too." "Ms. Bennett," Cole began, "those artifacts are my responsibility. That history is under my protection." Her voice held the same steel Marcus had heard when she faced down the wolves. "I'm not hiding in town while Tucker destroys everything we're trying to preserve." Another rapid clicking from the telegraph interrupted them. Tommy's eyes widened as he transcribed, "Urgent stop, Hawthorne Sheriff reports Tucker gang. Robbed bank stop, 3 dead stop artifacts and gold stolen. Stop extremely dangerous stop." "Well," Cole said grimly, "that changes things. They're not just claim jumpers anymore. They're killers with nothing left to lose." Marcus's mind raced through calculations, distance, time, options. Standing Bear's people will be preparing for the buffalo hunt. The camp will be mostly women and children. Tucker knows that, Sarah added. He's counting on it. Force them to evacuate, search the burial sites at leisure. By the time the marshals arrive, she didn't need to finish. They all knew what Tucker's men would leave behind. Desecrated graves, stolen artifacts, and possibly worse. The telegraph clicked again. Tommy swallowed hard as he wrote, "Personal for Sarah Bennett. Stop Thomas says Tucker hired Pinkerton detective. Stop claims you stole artifacts. Stop warrant issued. Stop clever." Sarah's laugh held no humor. "Pin everything on me. Make any evidence I've gathered worthless in court. Tucker must have friends in high places." "Doesn't matter," Marcus said firmly. "Standing Bear's treaty predates any warrant. And dead men in Hawthorne tell their own story." Cole nodded. Slowly. "I'll send a deputy to Helena, clarify things with the federal boys. Meanwhile," he turned to Sarah, "Miss Bennett, I'm officially placing you in protective custody, and since I'm short-staffed, I'm deputizing Mr. Blackwood here to handle that." "Duty?" Sarah caught on quickly. "So if I insist on riding to warn Standing Bear, your protective custody goes with you?" Cole managed a slight smile. "Officially, of course, I tried to stop you." Outside, thunder rumbled across distant peaks. A storm was building, both in the heavens and on the trail ahead. Marcus touched Sarah's elbow gently. "We need to move. That storm hits, we'll lose Tucker's trail." Sarah gathered her papers, including Standing Bear's treaty and the new telegrams. "Tommy, if anything else comes in, send it to the camp," the young operator promised. "My pa taught me the old signal mirrors. Weather holds. I can get messages. To you." Cole followed them to the livery. "I'll have my deputies follow once I get word to Helena. But Marcus," he gripped the younger man's arm, "Tucker's already killed for this gold. Man does that once, gets easier every time." "Understood." Marcus checked his rifle, then helped Sarah mount. "But he's never faced opponents like Standing Bear's people, or a woman who faced down wolves to protect her charge." The storm clouds gathered darker as they rode east, racing against time, weather, and human greed. Behind them, Tommy's telegraph. Key clicked out warnings and promises, each message adding weight to the choices ahead. Before them lay the long valley, where ancient bones held secrets worth killing for, and where justice would finally meet its test on sacred ground. Storm. Clouds darkened the eastern horizon as Marcus and Sarah pushed their horses along the valley trail. The air hung heavy with approaching rain and unspoken concerns. They'd been riding hard for 2 hours, trying to make up ground on Tucker's gang while staying alert for ambush. "They'll have scouts watching the main trails," Marcus said, guiding them toward a lesser-known path. "Old hunting route here cuts through the high country, longer but safer." Sarah nodded, her face drawn with fatigue but determined. "Tucker's played this cleverly. That Pinkerton warrant effectively makes me an outlaw. Even if we stop him, my testimony could be dismissed as the words of a fugitive. That's assuming the law sides with a Pinkerton over federal marshals." Marcus studied the clouds. "Banking a lot on corruption in high places. You'd be surprised how deep it goes." Sarah pulled a folded paper from her jacket. This came with Thomas's last letter before Hawthorne. Names, dates, connections, a web of wealthy collectors and corrupt officials profiting from artifact theft. Tucker's just the local face of something much bigger. They paused at a stream to rest the horses. Sarah winced as she dismounted, the long ride taking its toll. Marcus noticed but didn't comment. He'd seen enough of her strength to know she'd push through. "Thomas was investigating a collector in Boston," she continued, splashing water on her face. "Old money, political connections. He traced a shipment of artifacts, sacred objects from burial grounds across 3 territories, all sold at private auctions, all properly authenticated with forged papers. And the Pinkerton, probably genuine, probably doesn't know he's being used. These collectors maintain respectable facades. They donate to museums, fund universities." Her voice caught. "My own department head could be involved. It would explain some of his stranger decisions about this expedition." A distant crack of thunder punctuated her words. Marcus helped her remount, noting how she favored her right side. The wolf attack's injuries, hidden but not fully healed. "We should rest," he suggested. "There's a line shack ahead." "No time." Sarah shook her head. "Tucker's men will reach the summer camp by nightfall. Standing Bear's people can handle themselves," Marcus finished. "I've seen their warriors shoot. But you're right. We need to—" He cut off sharply, raising his hand for silence. Above the wind's rising moan, hoofbeats approached from the trail ahead. Marcus led their horses into a dense stand of pines, rifles ready. 4 riders emerged from a bend in the trail. Not Tucker's men. These rode too well, carried themselves too professionally. The lead rider wore a badge that caught the fading sunlight. "U.S. Marshal," Sarah breathed. "They made better time than expected." Marcus wasn't so sure. Something in their bearing, the way they studied the trail. "Wait." The lead rider raised his hand, and his companions spread out with practiced efficiency. "Miss Bennett," his voice carried clearly. "Federal Marshal Davis, we know you're near. Make this easier on yourself." Sarah started to move, but Marcus gripped her arm. "That's not right," he whispered. "Cole's telegram wouldn't have reached Helena yet, and real marshals would have checked in with him first." "Tucker's men," Sarah realized, "with stolen badges." "Miss Bennett," the false marshal called again, "you're wanted for theft and grave robbery. Surrender now. No one needs to get hurt." Marcus felt Sarah trembling, not with fear, but with rage. "They're wearing badges stolen from the men they killed in Hawthorne," she whispered, "using the law itself as a weapon. Like you said, corruption runs deep." Marcus studied the terrain, marking positions. "They're blocking the direct route to the summer camp. Options? There's a game trail up that ridge, steep, dangerous, in this weather, but it'll get us around them. If we're quiet—" Thunder cracked overhead, closer now. The horses shifted nervously as the first fat drops of rain began to fall. One of the false marshals pointed toward their position. "Covers?" "Blown," Marcus said calmly. "When I start shooting, head for that trail. Don't wait for me." "No." Sarah drew her own revolver, checking the loads. "We started this together. The artifacts, the truth, justice for those murdered men. It's worth fighting for. All of it." Marcus met her eyes, saw the same determination he'd witnessed the night of the wolf attack. She was right. Some things were worth the risk. The storm broke in earnest as gunfire erupted in the valley. Thunder and rifle shots merged into a single voice of judgment, while the rain washed away the false marshal's badges, revealing the killers beneath. And in that moment of truth and violence, Marcus realized that Sarah Bennett had become more than just someone to protect. She had become a partner in a cause greater than either of them, a quest to preserve not just artifacts and bones, but the very soul of the frontier itself. The first exchange of gunfire sent echoes rolling through the valley like distant drums. Marcus's shot caught the lead false marshal in the shoulder, spinning him from his saddle, while Sarah's revolver kept the others diving for cover. But their opponents were professionals, killers masquerading as lawmen, and they recovered quickly. Behind the rocks, Marcus guided Sarah to better position, years of combat experience taking over. "They'll try to flank us through that draw." Sarah reloaded with practiced efficiency that surprised him. "You've done this before," she observed. "More than just frontier skirmishes." A bullet sparked off stone near their heads. Marcus returned fire, his shot sending one of their attackers scrambling back. 2nd Virginia Cavalry, under General Stewart. Then Special Operations for the Army Corps of Engineers. Engineers? Sarah's eyes widened with sudden understanding. The Corps was involved in early archaeological surveys. "That's why you understand my work." Marcus nodded, mentally counting enemy shots. Mapped burial grounds, sacred sites, saw too many destroyed by progress after the war. Good men died preserving those places during the fighting, only to watch them plowed under for railroads later. Thunder crashed overhead as the storm intensified. Rain plastered Sarah's hair to her face as she squeezed off another round. 4 left. But we're running out of ammunition. They know it too. Marcus touched the medal he carried beneath his shirt, not for valor in combat, but for protecting a Cherokee burial ground from Confederate troops who'd planned to loot it. "There's something you should know in case—" "Don't!" Sarah's voice was fierce. "We're both surviving this." A new voice carried through the rain. "Marshal Davis is dead." One of their attackers sounded younger, uncertain. "This wasn't supposed to happen." "Shut up, Billy." Another voice, harder. "They're just a cowboy and a woman. Rush them from both sides." Marcus smiled grimly. "Billy's losing his nerve." "The hard one, that's Reynolds, Tucker's chief enforcer. He was at Hawthorne." "How do you know?" "That voice. Heard him giving orders during the ambush at Thunder Valley." Marcus checked his rifle's loads. "He's right about one thing. They have numbers. But they don't know about Antietam Creek." Sarah glanced at him questioningly as she ducked another shot. "Smaller force trapped by superior numbers. Saved my whole unit by understanding the terrain." Marcus pointed to where the game trail cut across the ridge. "That path's too narrow for more than one rider. Gets steeper near the top but levels out into a meadow, perfect for an ambush." "You want to retreat? Lead them into a trap?" Marcus shook his head. "We retreat. They'll guess our plan. Need to make them think they've won. Force us up there." He raised his voice. "Running low. We need to pull back." Sarah caught on quickly. "My horse is hit. We'll never outrun them." Their performance drew immediate response. "They're breaking," Reynolds shouted. "Take them alive if you can, dead if you must." Marcus and Sarah fired their remaining rounds in a covering barrage, then scrambled toward their horses. The false marshals pressed their advantage, bullets kicking up mud around them as they mounted. "Ride hard," Marcus instructed as they spurred toward the game trail. "But not too hard. Let them think they're gaining." The trail switched back and forth across the ridge face, rain making the footing treacherous. Their pursuers followed, gaining confidence as the distance closed. Marcus led them higher, counting on the storm to mask the sound of more riders approaching from the other side. "Almost there," he called to Sarah. "When we clear the ridge—" A bullet whined past his ear. Behind them, Reynolds urged his men on. "Don't let them reach the top." They burst onto the meadow in a spray of mud and rainwater, and there, through the curtain of rain, stood Sheriff Cole with 6 deputies, rifles raised. On the far side, Standing Bear and a dozen warriors sat their horses' bows drawn. "That's far enough." Cole's voice cut through the storm as Reynolds and his men emerged from the trail. "Throw down your weapons!" Reynolds reined up hard, his men bunching behind him. For a moment, Marcus thought he might try to fight. Then Billy dropped his rifle, followed quickly by the others. Only Reynolds remained defiant. "You're making a mistake, Sheriff. We have authority." "To murder bank clerks in Hawthorne?" Cole's deputy Jenkins stepped forward, pushing back his coat to reveal a bloody bandage. "I was there, Reynolds. Survived to ride back and warn the sheriff what was coming." As Cole's men moved in to disarm the false marshals, Standing Bear rode forward. "You carry something that belongs to my people," he said to Reynolds. "A medal taken from a dead marshal. His name was White Eagle, and he was my nephew." The color drained from Reynolds's face as he recognized the warriors for who they were. Not just tribal members, but family of the men murdered in Hawthorne. Marcus felt Sarah's hand slip into his as the rain began to ease. She touched the medal, beneath his shirt gently. "Your secret's safe," she whispered, "but I'm glad I know now why you understand what these sacred places mean." Thunder rumbled one last time, like distant drums fading into memory, as justice came at last to those who had tried to hide murder behind stolen badges. The sheriff's office smelled of wet leather and gunpowder as Reynolds and his men sat handcuffed to their chairs. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine evening sky and air washed clean of dust. Sarah spread her documents across Cole's desk, while Marcus and Standing Bear examined the contents of Reynolds' saddlebags. "Here," Sarah held, up a letter, its elegant Boston letterhead now seeming more ominous than prestigious. Signed by Sebastian Blackwood III, founder of the Blackwood Antiquities Association. Marcus looked up sharply. "Blackwood? You know him? Know of him? Distant cousin? Black sheep of the family? Built a fortune after the war, dealing in historical artifacts?" Marcus's voice carried a bitter edge. "Never questioned where they came from." Reynolds shifted in his chair, a calculating look crossing his face. "Might be willing to share some information for considerations." "Considerations?" Standing Bear's quiet voice carried centuries of judgment, like those you offered my nephew before shooting him. The prisoner fell silent, but Sarah was already diving deeper into the documents. Letters, shipping manifests, payment records. Sebastian Blackwood wasn't just buying artifacts, he was orchestrating their theft across multiple territories. Cole studied the papers. "Enough to prove conspiracy? More than enough?" Sarah pointed to specific entries. "Here, payments to Tucker for acquisition services. Coded telegrams about merchandise, matching dates of known grave robberies. And this," she held up a familiar document, "a copy of the same warrant they used against me, dated 2 weeks before any accusations were made." "They planned to discredit you from the start," Marcus said quietly. "Had to," Jenkins spoke up from his corner. "She was getting too close. The university expedition wasn't just about documenting sites. It was gathering evidence of systematic looting." Sarah nodded. "Thomas figured it out in Hawthorne. That's why they tried to kill him. But he managed to hide the most damaging evidence before they caught him. The expedition manifest," Marcus realized. "Proof of every site you visited, every artifact catalogued legally, which would expose every theft, every fake providence. Document Blackwood used to legitimize his collection." Sarah's eyes sparked with academic fire. "The manifest shows the true origin of these sacred objects. Many were still in place when we first surveyed the sites." Standing Bear lifted a brass key from Reynolds's belongings. "And this?" Reynolds tried to look away, but Sarah was already reaching for her notebook. "Safety deposit box key, Hawthorne Bank, box 414. She checked her records. The same day as the robbery, a large crate was shipped east by private rail car. Destination, Blackwood Antiquities Association. Tucker's payment, Marcus growled. Sacred artifacts and gold bought with blood. Cole stood, authorities settling around him like a well-worn coat. Jenkins, ride for Hawthorne. Tell them we have Reynolds, and get into that safety deposit box. He turned to Standing Bear. If we find what I think we'll find, my people will testify, Standing Bear agreed. Too long we have watched our ancestors' bones sold like cattle parts. The circle closes. A commotion outside drew their attention. Tommy Wells burst in, waving a telegram. From Helena, the real federal marshals, they found Tucker. Sarah snatched the paper, reading aloud. Tucker captured attempting to flee territory. Stop evidence recovered, including documents implicating Boston collectors. Stop Blackwood Antiquities Association under investigation. Stop maintain custody of prisoners. Stop. Reynolds slumped in his chair, the last of his defiance draining away. You don't understand what you're doing. Blackwood's reach goes all the way to Washington. Senators, judges. Good! Sarah's smile was fierce. Let all the corruption come to light. Every stolen artifact, every desecrated grave, every murdered innocent, all of it exposed. Marcus touched his cousin's letter, feeling the weight of family shame. The frontier's changing. Men like Blackwood think they can buy its soul, sell its history piece by piece. But they forgot something. What's that? Cole asked. Some things aren't for sale. Marcus met Sarah's eyes. Some treasures belong to all of us, past, present, and future. The stories in these bones and artifacts, they're part of who we are. Who we all are. Standing Bear nodded approval. Now you understand why Flying Hawk's bones were hidden. Not to keep gold secret, but to protect something more precious, truth itself. Sarah gathered the evidence carefully, each document another, link in a chain that would bind thieves and murderers. Outside, stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Eternal witnesses to justice, long delayed, but finally served. But in the shadows of neighboring buildings, unseen figures watched the sheriff's office. Tucker might be captured, Reynolds in custody. But other players in this deadly game remained free, and some secrets were worth killing to keep buried. The attack came just before midnight. Sarah had been cataloging evidence in the sheriff's office while Marcus and Cole discussed guard rotations. The first warning was the smell of smoke, followed by the crash of breaking glass as burning bottles sailed through the windows. Fire. Bombs! Marcus shouted, already moving. He tackled Sarah away from the desk as flames erupted across the documents. Cole grabbed for the strongbox containing the most crucial evidence, but intense heat drove him back. The prisoners! Sarah scrambled. To her feet, handkerchief pressed to her face. Through the thickening smoke, they could see Reynolds and his men still cuffed to their chairs, panicked now as fire spread rapidly across the wooden floor. Marcus drew his knife, cutting Reynolds free. "Get them out!" he yelled to Cole, who was already unlocking the others. "Sarah, the documents, on it." She darted toward the burning desk, ignoring the heat as she snatched what papers she could reach. Outside, shouts and gunfire erupted as hidden attackers revealed themselves. "Sheriff's office is burning!" someone yelled. "They're hitting the bank too!" Standing Bear appeared in the doorway, bow in hand. Hired guns, at least dozen men. They target anywhere evidence might be stored. A bullet splintered the doorframe near his head. Marcus shoved Sarah toward the back door, gathering what documents he could. "They're trying to destroy everything, silence everyone. Where's Jenkins?" "Rode for Hawthorne." Cole emerged from the smoke, prisoners in tow. "Which means the safety deposit box." Sarah's eyes widened. "That's their real target. Everything else is distraction." Reynolds, still coughing, laughed harshly. "You think Blackwood would leave that kind of evidence lying around? By now, his men have already..." A shadow detached itself from the alley's darkness. There was a meaty thunk, and Reynolds dropped unconscious as Morningflower lowered her club. "He talks too much." "The old mission," Standing Bear said urgently. "My people have already moved most evidence there. Sacred ground easily defended." More buildings were catching fire now as the attackers pressed their advantage. Marcus saw their strategy, create enough chaos to cover their true objective while destroying any evidence of the larger conspiracy. They're not just hired guns, he realized. Look how they move, how they coordinate. These are Pinkerton men, the real ones this time. Sarah clutched her salvaged documents. Blackwood's influence, using a legitimate agency to do his dirty work. Then they'll be thorough, Cole said grimly. We need to split up. Standing Bear, get Sarah and the evidence to the mission. Marcus, I'm staying with her. It wasn't a request. Cole nodded. Take Morning Flower's horse trail. I'll lead these fellows through town, make noise, draw attention, and the prisoners. My warriors watch them now, Standing Bear assured them, in caves where Blackwood's men will never find. They separated quickly, Sarah and Marcus following Standing Bear while Cole led his deputies toward the growing chaos in town. The night, air filled with shouts and the crackle of flames, but the old hunter's trail remained dark and quiet, until a branch snapped behind them. Marcus spun, rifle ready, as three shadows emerged from the tree line. The lead figure's stance was unmistakable, military-trained, probably ex-cavalry from his bearing. Sebastian, Marcus said quietly. Cousin. Sebastian Blackwood's cultured voice carried clearly. I should have known you'd be involved. Always were passionate about preserving history, rather than profiting from it. You mean stealing it? Sarah's contempt was clear. Murdering for it. My dear, you have no idea what's really at stake. Sebastian's smile gleamed in the darkness. This goes beyond mere artifacts, the gold deposits alone, but I couldn't expect someone of your limited vision to understand progress. I understand murder. Marcus kept his rifle steady, and corruption, and justice. Justice? Sebastian laughed. Look around you, cousin. The frontier is dying. In 20 years, all this will be railways and cities. We're just profiting from the inevitable. Now, the documents, please. All of them. No. Sarah's voice was steel. No? Sebastian sighed. You've seen what happens to those who interfere. That poor girl in Millbrook, the bank clerks in Hawthorne, even your own colleagues. Thomas was rather stubborn too at first. Marcus felt Sarah tense beside him. Thomas survived. Did he? Are you sure? Telegrams can be so easily forged after all. Before anyone could move, Standing Bear's voice came from the darkness. Enough words. The night erupted with silent arrows. Sebastian's men fell without a sound, but the man himself dove for cover, firing as he moved. Marcus shoved Sarah behind a boulder as bullets sparked off stone. You can't stop what's coming, Sebastian shouted. The frontier's finished, cousin. Best grab what you can before... His words cut off in a wet gurgle. Morning Flower stepped from the shadows, cleaning her knife. Now who talks too much? Marcus stared at his cousin's body, feeling nothing but a distant sadness. The mission, Standing Bear nodded. Others will come, but they'll find more than they expect. Sarah clutched the documents that would expose decades of theft and murder. It's not just about the gold or artifacts anymore. It's about the truth, all of it. As they rode toward the mission, fire lit the sky behind them where Silver Creek burned. But ahead, stars still shone clear and bright over sacred ground that had endured for centuries. Ground that would keep its secrets safe a while longer, protected by those who understood that some treasures were beyond price. Dawn found them, at the old mission, its adobe walls glowing rose gold in the early light. Sarah paced the chapel's worn flagstones, while Marcus kept watch from the bell tower. Standing Bear's warriors had melted into the surrounding hills, invisible but present, while smoke still rose from Silver Creek in the distance. Riders coming, Marcus called down. 2 of them, taking their time. Sarah rushed to the tower, hope and fear warring in her expression. Through Marcus's field glasses, she studied the approaching figures. The one on the left, his posture, the way he favors. His right side, her voice caught. It's Thomas. Marcus saw it too, a scholarly man trying to sit a horse, accompanied by one of Cole's deputies. They'd been watching for pursuit all night, but this approach carried no hint of threat. Thomas practically fell from his saddle when they reached the mission, his face pale with exhaustion. Sarah ran to him, stopping short when she saw the fresh scars on his face. "They tried very hard to silence me." Thomas managed a weak smile. "Failed, obviously." Inside the chapel, while Standing Bear's wife tended to Thomas's obvious exhaustion, the full story emerged. Thomas's voice grew stronger as he spoke, his academic's precision returning. "I knew something was wrong when I found the first discrepancy. A burial artifact listed in our survey, photographed and documented in situ, appearing 2 weeks later in a private Boston collection. The documentation perfect, but impossible." "Because you just discovered it," Sarah nodded. "Still in the ground." "Exactly. So I started tracking shipments, comparing dates, found a pattern. Wherever our expedition documented sites, looting followed within days. Someone was using our legitimate research to target locations." Marcus leaned forward. "Inside information from the university?" "Higher." Thomas drew a leather folio from his satchel. "Dean Blackwood himself, Sebastian's brother. He funded our expedition not to preserve history, but to exploit it. The academic surveys provided perfect cover and exact locations." Sarah's hands shook as she opened the folio. Inside lay photographs, letters, bank drafts, a paper trail leading from frontier graves to wealthy Boston collections. "The governor's wife proudly displays sacred artifacts in her parlor," Thomas continued. "Senators decorate their offices with stolen pieces, each sale laundered through legitimate dealers, each artifact given a false provenance. The profits," he shook his head, "conservative estimate, millions." "But the gold," Marcus pressed. Sebastian spoke of deposits, a convenient secondary goal. "The artifacts actually bring higher prices. Certain collectors pay fortunes for authentic pieces with ceremonial significance. The gold claims simply help cover the true purpose." Morning Flower, who had been listening silently, spoke. "The bones of our ancestors, sold to decorate wealthy homes. They're sacred objects treated like curiosities." "I documented everything," Thomas patted the folio. "Every sale, every connection. When they caught me in Hawthorne, I'd already hidden copies. Getting beaten was unpleasant, but it bought time for my contacts to secure the evidence." Sarah touched his scarred hand gently. "They said you were recovering. We feared that Sebastian was lying." "He was, about everything except one point. The frontier is changing, but not the way he claimed." Thomas straightened. "The antiquities. Act is gaining support in Congress. If we can prove this conspiracy, show the scope of the looting, it could help pass regulations protecting these sites." Marcus saw the implications. Not just criminal charges, actual systemic change, which is why they were willing to kill for these documents, Sarah added. This could end not just their operation, but the entire illegal trade. Standing Bear, who had been watching the valley, turned suddenly. "More riders. Many." Marcus rushed to the bell tower. Through his glasses, he counted at least 20 men approaching. "Federal marshals," he reported, recognizing the lead rider's badge glinting. "In the morning sun. The real ones this time, and Cole with them." Sarah gathered the evidence carefully. "Then let's finish this. Not just for the artifacts or gold, but for every site destroyed, every piece of history lost, every person killed to hide the truth." Thomas stood shakily. "The Boston conspirators won't go down easily. They have influence, power, but not truth," Standing Bear said simply. "Or honor, or the strength of those who protect what is sacred." The mission bell began to toll, calling all to witness as justice finally approached. Marcus watched Sarah, prepared to present her evidence, saw the strength in her that had faced down wolves and killers alike. She caught his eye and smiled, the smile of someone who had fought for truth and was ready for the final battle. Not with guns this time, but with evidence. Not for gold, but for history itself. And as the marshals dismounted in the mission yard, Marcus knew that this moment would itself become part of the story. How a determined woman, a principled lawman, and a tribal elder had stood together to protect not just artifacts, but the very soul of the frontier. The mission's chapel had never held such a gathering. Federal marshals stood along the walls, while Judge Harrison Blackwood, Sebastian's cousin from the territorial court, presided from behind a makeshift bench. His presence had been unexpected, and Marcus noted the subtle tension in Sarah's shoulders when the judge was announced. "Quite a series of allegations," Judge Blackwood's voice filled the chapel. "Conspiracy, murder, artifact theft, reaching into the highest levels of Boston society. These are extraordinary claims, Miss Bennett." Sarah stood straight, her academic's precision wrapped in steel. "With extraordinary evidence, Your Honor. Beginning with this." She placed the first document before him. The original survey map, marked with sites our expedition documented. Beside it, a coded telegram sent to Sebastian Blackwood listing the same locations as business opportunities. The judge examined the papers while Thomas limped forward with his testimony. Each word was measured, each detail supported by photographs and documents. The story unfolded methodically. How legitimate research had been corrupted into a criminal enterprise, how sacred sites were systematically looted, how murder had been used to silence witnesses. Standing Bear added his people's testimony, his dignity unmistakable, as he described generations of graves desecrated. These were not mere trinkets to be sold. Each object carried stories, memories, the wisdom of our ancestors. Tragic, Judge Blackwood agreed, though something in his tone rang false. But regarding the broader conspiracy, these accusations against respected members of Boston society are supported by banking records, Sarah pressed. She produced ledgers recovered from the Hawthorne Bank, payments traced through shell companies, all leading back to the Blackwood Antiquities Association. And this, she laid down a familiar document, the forged warrant issued against me, signed by a judge who, records show, was in Europe at the time. Marshal Clayton stepped forward. "Your Honor, we've confirmed the murders in Hawthorne. Tucker's confession implicated several prominent Boston collectors, and Sebastian Blackwood's death here. A regrettable act of self-defense," the judge cut in smoothly, "though it does leave us unable to question a key figure about these allegations." Marcus watched his cousin's face carefully. There was something there, a hint of satisfaction when Sebastian was mentioned. He remembered family gatherings long ago, the web of connections and favors that bound wealthy families together. "There is one more piece of evidence," Thomas spoke up. From his satchel he withdrew a final folder. Sebastian Blackwood kept detailed records, insurance, you might say, against betrayal by his partners. "I found these in his private safe in Hawthorne." Judge Blackwood's mask slipped for just a moment. "Those documents weren't listed in any inventory." "No," Thomas agreed, "because I retrieved them before the bank robbery, before Sebastian's men tried to kill me. Inside are names, dates, photographs, everything needed to prove who profited from this enterprise." The judge's hand moved toward the folder, but Marshal Clayton was faster. "These will be entered into federal evidence, Your Honor, along with—" He produced a telegram. "This message from the Attorney General's office authorizing a broader investigation into corruption in the territorial courts." The color drained from Judge Blackwood's face. Sarah stepped forward, her voice carrying to the chapel's rafters. "This isn't just about stolen artifacts or gold claims. This is about justice itself, about whether the law truly protects all people and all heritage, or just the wealthy and powerful." Standing Bear moved to her side, drawing himself to full height. "My people have watched your laws fail us before, but today we stand with those who would make those laws serve truth." Marcus saw the moment his cousin realized he was trapped. The judge's fingers drummed once on the bench. A family. Telly remembered from poker games long ago. Perhaps, given the scope of these allegations, a special federal commission is already being formed. Marshal Clayton nodded. "You'll have plenty of time to address these matters in Washington, Your Honor, after we discuss your own involvement." The chapel erupted in controlled chaos as the marshals moved to take the judge into custody. Sarah gathered the evidence carefully. Years of academic discipline protecting crucial documents, even in this moment of victory. Through the windows, Marcus saw Standing Bear's people emerging from the hills, watching justice unfold on sacred ground. Their presence felt like witnesses from across time, seeing the moment when the tide finally turned toward preservation rather than exploitation. Morning Flower appeared beside him, her voice soft but carrying deep wisdom. The circle closes. What was hidden comes to light. What was stolen may yet return home. Sarah joined them, the precious documents secured. Her hand found Marcus's, squeezing gently. Together they watched as Judge Blackwood was led away, his power stripped not by violence but by truth, carefully preserved and finally revealed. The morning sun streamed through the chapel's windows, illuminating motes of dust that danced like scattered gold. But the real treasure, Marcus knew, lay in the papers that would protect sacred grounds for generations to come. In the end, justice had been served not by guns or badges, but by the patient work of those who believed that history itself was worth fighting to preserve. Silver Creek was changing. The fire had claimed several buildings, but as crews worked to rebuild, something else was being reconstructed, the town's very identity. Marcus watched from the newly repaired sheriff's office as a university wagon arrived, carrying proper storage cases for the recovered artifacts. Each piece catalogued, Sarah explained to the gathered town council, documented, preserved, and most importantly, returned to tribal custody when appropriate. She stood before the same men who had once called for her arrest, now listening intently as she outlined the preservation protocol. Mayor Wilson, who had been conspicuously quiet during the earlier chaos, cleared his throat. And the economic implications are considerable. Thomas stepped in, his scars less angry now in the autumn light. The university is establishing a permanent research station here. Legitimate archaeological study brings grants, scholars, sustainable commerce. Not to mention, Sheriff Cole added, the Federal Marshal's office wants to headquarter their new Antiquities Protection Unit in Silver Creek. Seems we've developed a reputation for uncovering artifact theft rings. Marcus hid a smile at the pride in Cole's voice. The sheriff had testified for hours in the federal investigation, helping untangle the web of corruption that had stretched from frontier graves to Boston parlors. Judge Blackwood's arrest had opened floodgates of evidence as other conspirators rushed to save themselves. The land itself remains sacred, Standing Bear reminded them from his place at the council table. The first time in the town's history a tribal elder had held such a position. But there can be respect between peoples, understanding. Sarah unrolled a map across the table. These markers show protected sites. With proper documentation and tribal consultation, we can ensure both preservation and study, a model for other territories to follow. The Antiquities Act guidelines, Thomas added, specifically cite our example here. Cooperation between law enforcement, academic institutions, and tribal authorities. Through the window, Marcus watched Gerald Walsh, supervising the unloading of a printing press. The newspaper man had transformed overnight from scandalmonger to crusading journalist, his exposés of the artifact theft ring drawing national attention. Progress, Morning Flower said softly beside him, doesn't always mean destruction. She nodded toward the street, where Reverend Harrison was deep in conversation with a tribal youth, learning the true stories behind artifacts he had once condemned as heathen relics.